All right, welcome. Today, we're going to break down a really powerful way of looking at prayer. It comes from a sermon that sees it as more than just a religious act, but is something at the very core of the human experience. We're going to get into why we pray, how we should do it, and who we should be praying for. So, the sermon kicks off with this huge question, one you've probably thought about yourself. Why is it that in moments of total crisis, even people who say they don't believe in God often find themselves, well, praying? And to really bring this home, the text shares this incredibly moving story. It's about an atheist who gets the worst news imaginable. His wife has terminal cancer. And what's the first thing he does? He goes out to the car park and he prays. This moment is used to suggest that maybe, just maybe, prayer is something deeper than a learned ritual. And that story leads us straight to the sermon's foundational argument, that prayer actually begins as a natural human instinct. The idea here is that a consciousness of God is, in a way, hardwired into us, no matter what we say we believe. So here's the crucial point. This innate awareness of God, even if we push it down, tends to bubble up to the surface when we're desperate. That atheist in the car park wasn't suddenly converting on the spot. According to this view, he was acting on a deep-seated human impulse that's in all of us. Okay, so from there, we get to the absolute heart of the sermon. Prayer is put into this really fascinating dual framework. It's presented as both a duty and a delight. So what in the world does that actually mean? Well, think about these two sides of the coin like this. Prayer as a duty is like a child being taught their nightly prayers. It's a divine command, something we learn to follow. But prayer as a delight? That's like the same child just spontaneously climbing up onto their father's knee just because they want to talk. It's not forced, it's relational. And to really drive home that idea of delight, the sermon uses this powerful metaphor. For a born-again Christian, prayer is like breathing. It's not some task you check off a to-do list. It's this constant, life-sustaining thing you do without even thinking about it, the very sign that you are spiritually alive. Okay, so if prayer is supposed to be this constant conversation, what does that conversation actually sound like? Well, the text breaks it down for us into 5 distinct parts, giving a really practical structure to it all. So the structure it lays out is meant to create a balanced conversation, and it moves through 5 key stages: praise, confession, thanksgiving, supplication, and finally intercession. Let's dig into what each of those means. First up, the conversation kicks off with praise. And this isn't about asking for things. It's about starting by simply acknowledging who God is, the creator, the redeemer, the judge. The sermon really stresses that this is a vital first step, one that sets the right tone for everything else, but is so often skipped when we're in a rush to get to our requests. After praise, the focus turns inward to confession. This is all about being honest about our shortcomings, both those general character flaws like pride or anger, and the specific things we've done wrong. In this framework, you can't really move forward without it. It's a necessary step to restore the relationship. Part 3 is Thanksgiving. This is about showing gratitude for everything, not just the obviously good stuff, but even for the difficult times. The sermon brings up the story of the 10 lepers who were healed, but only one, just one, came back to say thank you. It's a powerful reminder of how important this part is and how easily we forget. Fourth, we have supplication. Now, this is where you pray for your own needs. But the key distinction made here is that this isn't primarily about asking for a new car or a promotion. The focus is really on our spiritual needs, asking for things like grace, wisdom, guidance, and the strength to overcome temptation. And finally, the 5th part is where the prayer expands outward with intercession. This is basically supplication, but for other people. The focus is twofold. You pray for their earthly well-being, their health and stability, but also, and most importantly from this perspective, for their soul's salvation. So that idea of praying for others, that opens up a whole new topic, which is the sheer scope of who we're meant to pray for. And let me tell you, it's not just about your friends and family. The way it's described is like these expanding circles of concern, kind of like ripples in a pond. You start with yourself, but then the circle widens to include your family, then your neighbors and colleagues, then your church, then your national leaders, and eventually the circle is wide enough to include all of humanity. And when it talks about praying for political leaders, it gives a really specific, practical reason. The goal is to help create a stable society, one where people can lead, as it says, a quiet and peaceable life in all godliness and honesty, free from chaos and turmoil. So, if you're supposed to be praying for all these people, when and where is all this supposed to happen? The final section makes it clear that prayer isn't a once-a-week event. It's a continuous practice that happens in all kinds of settings. It outlines several key contexts. You've got that informal, constant prayer that just happens throughout your workday, what someone famously called praying and digging. Then there's the dedicated daily time for prayer in secret. There's also daily family prayer. And finally, there's the communal prayer that happens at church. And to really hammer home how important that group prayer is, the sermon uses this amazing quote from the famous preacher Charles Spurgeon. He called the church prayer meeting the central heating system, or the powerhouse of the church. It's the engine that keeps the whole thing spiritually warm and alive. So when you put all of these pieces together, the natural instinct, the duty, and the delight, those 5 parts, and all the different settings, the ultimate goal becomes crystal clear. It's to pray without ceasing, to transform prayer from just a list of requests into an endless, ongoing conversation with God. And that leaves us with a final thought to chew on. This framework gives us this incredibly rich, disciplined, and all-encompassing view of prayer. So the question is, how does this kind of constant, structured approach challenge the way many of us think about prayer today, as just a way of asking for stuff when we need it?